There, back to talk San Diego Comic-Con. Sunday, final day. We started doing these lives. Well, we started doing these lives like weeks ago, months ago. At this point, I don't know how long ago, but doing them on the various trips down here. But we did try to start on Monday last week, and the goal was to do it every night. And kind of do that instead of the old way that we did the podcast, which would be kind of every 3 days, and they'd go up mostly after Comic Con. So this time we tried to do them in real time, and you've been like editing the podcast to get on the audio only feed as well, which is crazy. I've been fitting that in on top of all the Comic Con stuff. But we're here on Sunday. We did every night except for Friday night, which we kind of acknowledged early on that wasn't going to work, and so let's wrap up talking about Comic-Con, and we'll talk about Sunday and kind of the experiences there. And so thanks to all that will join us live in the chat. We'll take questions at the end as we have been. And then also anybody that's listening or watching video later and audio only, etc. Thanks and appreciate all of you. So with that said, Sunday, we knew we had a kind of collection of things. We were going to be trying to do the FX offsite. We're debating what to do with Hall H because there was a few things that interested us there. We wanted to do more of the floor. We had to finish up our 8 aisles that we had left and a few other things there. And so we got there later than we have gotten there any of the days, and maybe any of the days ever, really. I don't know. It was a late day for us. Like, we got there, I mean, I was getting on the floor at like 9:15 or something like that. So we got there pretty late, and we weren't really trying to get any major swag things or stuff like that. It was kind of a leisurely way in that way. We just wanted to get there and kind of finish our rows and kind of get going on the day, but we didn't have any goals of like exclusives or swag hunting or anything like that.
Yeah, and I basically stayed in the car and like finished gathering my stuff or whatever when you went upstairs. So you went in the behind.
Yeah, so it was a very long line for E at the time that I got there, which makes sense because to 9:30, and it was kind of looping in front of the convention center. But it took about 10 minutes to get in the building and then up the escalator and all the way around to sales. I did a couple prize drops, one in sales, one over by Ballroom 20, and then hooked around and kind of was amongst the last few hundred people going down the escalator. So I still got my little going down the escalator fix one last time for Comic Con.
Yeah, and I did not do the escalator. By the time I went upstairs, I basically was able to just walk into Hall E, and I was able to go straight onto the floor. So I think that was probably like 9:40, 9:35, something like that. So yeah, I was definitely not doing the escalator again,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, and I just looked for any quick soft spots of anything there. Like I could get QR codes for Hasbro, but didn't need those. Could get tickets for Hallmark, but didn't need those. You know, they got some pins at IDW or whatever, but it was just kind of I just kind of sneaked around, see if I see anything. I think the only thing that was kind of interesting that we just hadn't picked up yet was from the Crapopolis booth that was across from Toddland over there. They were giving out the buttons. They were giving out lanyards, Fox Animation Domination. They were giving out posters. And it was kind of nice. They had them, they were like tying the lanyard as like a holder around the poster. And so that was kind of a nice little grab there. And we saw our friend Mike around that time, who was getting posters at Hulu, and we hadn't seen him for a while. So that was awesome. We got to hang out. We didn't get much time to hang out with him. We normally hang out on Tuesday nights. That's like our annual tradition at Comic Con, but he didn't get in until Wednesday. And if you follow along with us, you know by the time we get to Wednesday, it's like we're booked kind of every minute of the day. So we had about a half hour on the floor that we kind of hung out and talked and caught up and things like that. And then we finished our 8 aisles. Which I do feel like in general, the booths this year, I feel like we definitely saw them all, but I feel like it was a similar thing maybe in 2018 or 2019 where I feel like I saw them all, but I don't know that I really saw them all. Meaning like we went by them and I looked at them, but I don't know that I really was able to soak it all up. And we were able to loop some later in the day, which we'll get to that decision later when it comes to the Hall H stuff. But there's just so much to see. And, you know, even in a year where there was much made of like WB not being there or Oni or Dark Horse on there. There was still just so much to see in the booths, and maybe arguably more to see in some ways because of some of those bigger booths not being there, and they were replaced by 8 smaller booths that had kind of unique stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say the last few Comic Cons, we've come to Sunday and we've had a lot of the floor to still go through. So I thought it was good that we were able to get most of it and only had 8 aisles left to do today. So we did, but yeah, I don't know. It's definitely not a show where we do a lot of like bin diving where we're looking for comic books and stuff. And because there just isn't really time for that. I mean, obviously we did a little, or you did more, but we did a little bit of that. But yeah, we didn't. There was, I think, of several booths with like toys and stuff that you wanted to spend more time with, but we just really didn't have the time for you to really deep dive into any of those booths, or
Yeah.
not too much. So, um, yeah, I would love to have an extra day or two to really take in the floor, but obviously that's not a thing. And so we did the best we could, but we did go up every aisle of the exhibit floor and at least saw everything. If we even if we weren't able to really take it all in.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing is it always feels like Comic Con. I saw in our chat, Noe Jose said, let's make a hashtag of make Comic Con 7 days. And that's how it always feels like. It feels like it's so short. And one of the comments I made to you earlier today is I feel like for us, we start getting on the ground normally to cover on the Monday before Comic Con. And that day always blows by. And then Tuesday seems to go by faster, and Wednesday even faster. And it's just like every day fast. It really does feel like a roller coaster. And then you get to Sunday and it just feels like, I mean, it always feels like we wake up and then the next thing I know, we're going to sleep, or in this case, we're recording this, podcast at 10 o'clock at night or whatever. It just goes by so fast. And so I definitely appreciate all the time there. I'm super fatigued, like the idea of not having to get up super early tomorrow. That is something that I am looking forward to. But at the same time, I really wish we were going back to Comic Con tomorrow. So it's an interesting feeling just how this con goes so fast.
And there was a question by what we mean by soak up the booth. And no, we don't really like talk to all the vendors. In fact, we talk to very few vendors, relatively speaking. But what we mean is like actually stopping at a booth and taking it all in and stuff. In an ideal situation, like for smaller shows, what we like to do especially is we'll go down the aisles one direction, and then if we have time, we flip it and go in the opposite direction, because it always seems like if we every time we go by booths at a lot of the shows we go to, there's stuff that we didn't see the first time. So if we go in the opposite direction, then we take in even more of it. So yeah, it's not necessarily even physically stopping at each booth, but it's really trying to take in what each booth has to offer in an ideal situation. But in this situation, there were some rows where we were just kind of walking and like I was more using my peripheral vision to like kind of take
Yeah.
things in as we went by them. So
Yeah. I think most conventions we walk all the rows twice, and like you said, we do it opposite directions to take it in. And most shows we cover don't have a lot besides the floor. Like they may have a few panels, they may have a few panel tracks, things like that, but a lot of it's the floor, and we have a lot of time zigzagging and seeing the booths over and over and over again. And Comic Con, a lot of times we're seeing each booth once, except for those booths that maybe are that big draw in the center where we're getting, swag or things like that. So yeah, it is what it is. If it was one more day longer, there'd probably just be that many more panels and offsites and other things that would distract as well. So there's always going to be that. And obviously that's again the thing that's great about Comic Con is I don't know how you could ever really get bored with it or tired of it, because it's just, I mean, for me at least, it's always like wonderful excitement around every corner, and the fact that it always leaves me wanting so much more is what makes the countdown. I mean, I did look, so it is 360 days to the next Comic Con, and like especially after the pandemic of going 3 years, that doesn't seem that long away, which I like. That's the one thing that I kind of took out of the pandemic that I think's helped me is like a year seems so much shorter now after going so long without some of these things. The fact that parks and cons existed for about 14 months in California with parks and cons closed entirely is, crazy to me. And so the idea that we'll be back in Comic Con 360 days, and obviously a good 100 days before that, we're back in the mode of like doing videos and stuff. So it doesn't seem like it's as far as a time as it has in some cases, though. So some of the booths, so it was interesting this year. This was by far the least amount of exclusives that has ever in my history of Comic Con interested me. And it's not that there aren't wonderful things. There are wonderful things, but we've talked about it before. I mean, we really don't have any wall space at this point, so we usually aren't paying attention to a lot of the prints out there and things like that. And that anything that kind of hangs on the wall, a lot of times it's hard to fit in. Being a toy and a comic collector, that's usually always my first leaning in those ways. But there was a lot of cuts in those areas, and there was a lot of things that didn't grab. So we actually spent, I mean, we spent maybe a third of what we would normally spend at Comic Con in general. And a separate kind of areas, things that we did buy, like your trip to the Funko booth that we talked about on a previous episode. I mean, a lot of that ends up being like trade fodder, because there were some definitely in there. The Chrysanthemum pop is, amazing. There's a bunch of incredible characters in there, but a lot of it will be those types of things that we can use as potential trade leverage for D23 or Comic Con 23 or 24 or 25, whatever it is. I still have like Mossman deodorant from the Mattel booth in 2009 that, used one recently for part of a trade and stuff. So it's always great to get those things. But in terms of like, I definitely need this, there wasn't as many things. So one thing I don't usually do a lot of at Comic Con is just go through old bins. Usually it's more about newer comics, new writers, new artists and stuff. But I did go through some older bins and just picked up 3 books today, and a couple the other day, but a Captain America 193 to fill in a hole there. And then I just loved these couple covers here, and just I'll never have even close to half of the Thors, but these Thors 130, I thought this was a pretty awesome cover with Hercules, who, spoilers, is coming to the MCU. I think we're past territory we can talk about that, so it's kind of fun. And then Ego the Living Planet, who's probably, we've seen about the end of him in the MCU for a while with the Guardians of the Galaxy, but this was his first kind of full appearance here in Thor 133. So I love picking those up for, I think it was like $34 or something along those lines. You picked up a really awesome sweatshirt that I thought you should have picked up earlier in the con, and it was still there, and it wasn't exclusive to San Diego or anything, but a Her Universe Ahsoka one. And those are probably both things that we normally wouldn't buy at Comic Con, because we would have been so wrapped up in like the the Hasbro booth or some other types of exclusives that would have really grabbed. But instead it was like, okay, well, let's get these things that we could get at another point in time. I'm sure you could probably get that sweatshirt at D23 or online. I could get those comics at a smaller comic show or Frankenstein. But because we weren't spending as much in those ways, we were like, okay, well, let's look at a couple of these things.
Yeah, I definitely like the sweatshirt. I think you're the one who noticed it the other day at some point and pointed it out. And I like the colors, and I thought like the symbol, and I like Ahsoka. But I was like, oh, let's wait and see, because if you follow, you know that I really try not to buy too much at shows. I try not to get too distracted. I have plenty of purses, plenty of shirts, plenty of backpacks and stuff that I rarely use, but I buy them because I get caught up in whatever I want to buy something. But a sweatshirt, a hoodie, I will definitely use, and an Ahsoka one, I definitely will. But I held off until I was like, once today came, I think I even asked him like, so we're like under budget, right? Okay, well maybe I'll get the sweatshirt. Okay, so we did. So I got a sweatshirt, a hoodie, and it's a really nice soft material. So hopefully that'll be comfortable.
Fine. And then I talked about before, friend Steve was able to get me the Ghost Rider that I talked about kind of being my one big exclusive, and it was really nice to have an exclusive that was just $25 as like my main goal. There was no big, Hasbro Death Star or some, I mean, usually Hasbro has some $80 set or $150 set or something like that. That's like, oh, I really need this. But this was just cheap, but I just think it is absolutely a celebration of the character with this first appearance in Marvel Spotlight, kind of a recreation of the comic cover and having him in Hot Wheels form. And that's my favorite way of looking at Hot Wheels, is when they do things like that that are kind of tying into the comic books and stuff. So I was excited about that. Linda in the chat, ooh, Ghost Rider looks so cool. Thank you. I agree. That was exciting to get. And I was surprised he did sell out of the floor. Mattel sold out last we looked around 4 o'clock. They had sold out about half of their items and half they had left. Ghost Rider was amongst the ones that sold out, which I was really surprised. I kind of thought Ghost Rider would hang around, but it was still there. Brandon's Build, hello there. Do you wish there had been many more exclusives? It's kind of a yes and no. I always feel like exclusives, I love the hype of them going into the con, of like getting excited about them and having that list. But I also kind of appreciated not feeling so much a slave to all these different booths, that there was stuff that I liked, but not stuff that I felt like I absolutely needed. Um, that felt kind of good. I mean, in the end, I hope that we go back to a world where there are, Hasbro has all these different things that I want, and that this booth and that booth and all of that. But I was okay. Image, we haven't talked much about, but I mean, Image and Skybound, all of them had cut so far down on their exclusives. Dark Horse not being there, no exclusives, and these are
Did
booths.
Gentle Giant have any this year?
Good point. Gentle Giant is going through their own whole thing, and so like most of the Gentle Giant stuff is now being sold to the Diamond booth, which is kind of a no. They did an exclusive for online one similar to Hasbro, but yeah, that was one of those booths where I was trying to get the Boba Fett droids edition and stuff, and so all of those being erased, it made it a lot easier for me, and thankfully. We had a friend that was able to help us out with that one, and we were able to get the online version as well, which now, we'll have that as an extra one to keep around and maybe trade down the line or something like that. But I do hope we get back all those exclusives from those companies. I do hope, particularly Lego and Hasbro. I think those are two. Lego, Hasbro, Mattel, and Funko. I think those four are really important to a lot of guests at Comic Con, exclusive hunters particularly, but I think just in general, a lot of attendees. Um, and so I hope they do come back. Not that NECA and Factory and Jazzwares came on the scene this year and we'll talk about them in a minute, had a lot of great stuff. But I do think there's something about those are kind of cornerstones for a lot of people, their Comic Con experience, and not having Hasbro be a prominent force. That's very similar to not, for someone else not having, the CW show show up to Comic Con, or not having Marvel show up, or whatever it might be, is we all have our things. That way. Question from Linda: did you notice that it was easier to buy exclusives without the lottery ticket? Is what it was said. Let me see. Pulling it back up here. Did you notice that it was easier to buy exclusives even without lottery tickets? It looked like standby lines were actually doable and successful. Yeah, definitely. In fact, we at the end of the day did exactly that with Jazzwares, and I think we found several opportunities where you had the lottery, but it was like, yeah, come on in line. In fact, I mean,
Well, Hallmark, I think,
yeah.
I guess Hallmark wasn't a lottery. They do the ticket system, but Hallmark at noon was opening up to anybody who didn't have a ticket. And I think most of the Star Wars ornaments were sold out. But I think maybe even those were available.
Yeah, and at the end of the show, that's a good point actually. And at the end of the show, Hallmark had all of their exclusives still available, which we don't normally see, except for the Gonk droid from Star Wars. And I think, that's the thing too, is like some of the exclusives that, you know, obviously Hasbro and Lego kind of just sat it out in a lot of ways. But then when you look at, like, in the case of Hallmark, they had exclusives, but they weren't really great ones. They weren't like, they didn't have their Trek ornament. The Trek ornament's been kind of a cornerstone of their stuff. They're very, very popular. They didn't have it, probably, part of all the shipping crisis and other labor things and stuff like that. But I think that also, kind of weighed into it a little bit. And I think there's probably a lot more buying in other parts of the con as well when there was less money spent at some of those big booths. So, okay, so those things. Let's talk about FX then, and we'll show some things we picked up too. FX, we did do a video. You can find it on our channel there. We did a live. If you do watch it, you'll probably want to do some fast forwarding with it, because we knew we needed to do a video of it. We had lots of people request video of it, and especially because it had a real kind of what felt like a haunt tie-in, and FX has many years, and so we had a lot of requests for that one. So as we got in there, we're like, okay, we need to do a video. We're going to do it. We're going to go ahead and do live, and then it was a very slow moving process. I mean, basically FX was one long series of photo ops, and they kept, and it wasn't even like you take your own photo type of photo ops. It was like you had to check in with a person to help you take your photo. So it was a very slow process. So we have like a 26-minute video that I feel like has like 6 minutes of content in it, and a lot of just stopping and kind of waiting to take a photo and talking about, other scenic pieces and stuff like that. The American Horror Story kind of labyrinth theme was how it started out, and that was a neat idea. But because you were guided through it, and because it was daylight and hot, it just didn't really work in terms of like any scare factor at all. It was kind of weird, and the scares almost felt awkward because it was just so like bright, and you're with 100 people in there kind of making your way through and stuff, and so it just didn't feel like it worked. But there was awesome actors in there. It just felt like kind of the layout and design was a little clunky, or at least our time through FX was clunky.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been nice if it had been not the labyrinth setup and was just kind of open and
Yeah.
here's photo ops that you can go to and stuff.
Or a labyrinth that you can go to and get scares, but you can just wander the labyrinth. That doesn't maybe have necessarily, photo ops. They have the great, kind of characters design and actors in there, and they gave some fun little pieces of swag with a little kind of like compass. There was
Not a
the
compass, a
compact. I'm
with a
sorry.
mirror.
What We Do in the Shadows had the No More Bat Breath with Laszlo on the cover there. I mean, that was part of, so a lot of it was American Horror Story, but then you ultimately made your way, additionally to that, to a Mayans photo op, which was kind of awkward. It was just like, here's a motorcycle with Mayans spelled in hedges. And then there was the What We Do in the Shadows was Nadia's nightclub.
Well, with the motorcycle, you could sit on it, I guess, to do the photo op. And in the American Horror Stories, there was like, um, there was a swing seats that you could sit on for a photo op, and there was a scare actor that was popping out. And when it's in that group setting, once one person gets scared,
Yeah, it doesn't really
nobody
work.
else really gets scared because everybody knows it's there. But
Yeah.
as we were finishing up, we did see the first one from the next group, and they really did get scared. But again, it's like only it works for the first person.
Yeah, that was awkward. There's like 10 people waiting there, and yeah, a person sits down and they jump out. And it's like, well, we all see the person. So yeah, that was a little strange. Nadia's nightclub, though, they had you stand on a platform, and it did kind of, and you were supposed to like dance, and it took video of you and kind of sent you a little short video of yourself with effects.
Yeah, I was really hoping and kind of expecting that Nadia, whatever,
Nightclub.
Nightclub was going to be similar to their setup in 2019,
Yeah,
which was
that was
basically,
amazing.
I think it was kind of, we were going into their house sort of, and so there's like a couch in an area, there was like a photo op, you got some,
There's like a
there's like some
magic show,
snacks and stuff, like ice
theatrics,
cream
yeah.
bars and stuff, and there were actors in there, and like there was
It was
a
a
lot
lot.
going on, but it was mostly kind of like hang out. So I thought, well, the nightclub is going to be something similar to that. We're going to hang out in a nightclub. It will get some air conditioning, some dimmed lighting, and there'll probably be some actors, and we'll just kind of interact. But that was definitely not the case.
No, no. And then when we exited that, it was for Little Demons. It was just kind of this weird archway of color, just kind of the string stuff hanging down. And it's weird 'cause as it was being built, I was trying to figure out like, what are they doing with this little, or I didn't know it was Little Demons at the time, but I was like, what are they doing with this? Because it's like orange and yellow kind of like lines hanging down in this tunnel, and it didn't match all of like the decrepit trees and the arches and things like that, and it still didn't match here. I guess the idea was like we were going into hell, I think, or something like that. But as we got into there was a roulette table, a mini roulette table, and you could, I think there was like what, two chances on the roulette of winning a bucket hat, and they would make it right there for you. Or if you didn't, like we didn't, you got your choice of a few different types of Little Demon hot sauces. So we got the habanero with the demon on the bottle, and then got the garlic with
which
one
I
of the
think
other
was the
characters.
mild
Yeah.
version.
Which I'm curious about this show. I mean, Aubrey Plaza, Danny DeVito, there's some, really good people in this and stuff. So I'm not anxious to add another thing to watch to our list of things to watch, but I am, interested in it. So it was.
It is animated, by
yeah,
the way.
it is animated.
So
yeah.
we won't actually see Danny DeVito, but and they had like a big screen that was kind of playing, kind of behind the scenes, of like them recording the voice actors, and then they were also at points in time flashing like pictures. I think that people probably tagged themselves in the photo op and stuff, and we're kind of showing those and stuff. As far as the taste of the hot sauces, we haven't even opened them yet, so I don't know if they taste good or not.
Yeah, we'll see later. So it was okay. It was one of those things like we had a media appointment. We still waited about 20 to 30 minutes in line with only 6 people in front of us in our media line. So that's a lot, because everything you're like, well, this is like times 100 for every regular attendee here. So if I had waited 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours for at least the experience you and I got, I would have been very disappointed. And again, the actors were fantastic in there, though. The guards, like at Nadja's, was just, they were so funny with their interactions. The kind of doll type creepy characters, that whole scene was so fun that they had to sit down at dinner with them, basically, or lunch or whatever, and we're trying to intimidate us. I mean, really good actors. It was just, they were kind of given some weird situations with the sets, and just the pacing and timing, just kind of the overall design seemed like a difficult thing to work for such a high capacity. It seemed like a really great thing for like 100-person event or something, but when you're talking about thousands and thousands of thousands of people at Comic-Con, it seemed like kind of a rough setup. So but it was I'm glad we were able to do it. It is what it is. It wasn't to me anywhere close to what 2019 was, but we'll see then what it ends up being in 2023.
Yeah, and just to clarify, so the press line, basically the way it seemed that they were doing it was for each group that went in, they took two or one group of press. So
So about 10 minutes, it seemed like, in between each group going. So that's a long wait. And the groups were about 8 to 10 people, it seems. So a very long wait for attendees out there and out in the sun, So so from there.
I was just gonna say, I also kind of miss that FX used to have kind of like a seating area for the last several Comic Cons where they had some form of water that you could get, like a lot of times it was or sometimes I think one year was like a one of the cups that kind of
what we
shrinks
do
down. I can't
or Always Sunny in Philadelphia, that was their area.
Yeah, and you could go up to a little spigot and get some water and stuff, or
That was
they
a good
give
one.
out sunblock and stuff. And at the entrance of Nadja's nightclub, there was like it looked like the hand sanitizer dispenser, but it was dispensing SPF 30 sunblock and stuff. But yeah, if it had been free roaming, if there there were
Free
different
roaming's
things.
the key, I think, for that is
Yeah.
what it needs. Yeah.
So
Okay, so then we decided, well, we grabbed lunch, actually a pretty quick lunch, but lunch at the new Hudson and Nash with their Comic Con, their kind of abbreviated Comic Con menu over at the Bayfront. And by that time, it was like really needed to get some air conditioning. We had basically gotten to the floor, and like I normally don't go more than like 2 hours on my feet, and at this point we were on like 5 hours on my feet, so
yeah,
it
if
was
you're
time
not
to.
familiar, Sean's had like some feet surgeries and stuff, and so it's really painful to be standing, and we did not take any breaks in that whole time. So
Yeah. So we took the break at the Bayfront, and then we made our way back into the convention center, and the decision was to go to Hall H then for what we do in the shadows. And so we did go over there. The line was starting to accumulate for Funko. And in the end, I was a little surprised. Funko did not fill the room, so we ended up not going to Funko, and we'll talk about that in a minute in their Hall H panel. But um, they were basically accessible. They weren't using the chutes though for a chunk of that time, so it looked really strange because like people were lined up on the marina, and it all of a sudden looked like, oh my gosh, it's madness. But people were able to get in there. We were able to get into what we do in the shadows. Enjoyed that panel. Well, actually, I should say they started out with 20 minutes of just showing this week's episode, which I didn't have a ton of value in, but then they had some of the cast there, and that was neat. That there was just this ability to see that cast there. One of the things that I thought was really cool when they introduced the cast, or actually when they introduced the panel, is that this was, I think, the second time they'd been at Comic-Con, but the first time they'd been in Hall H, and that they're really excited to be there, and specifically Sunday in Hall H. And Matt Berry was there. I see Fresh News 247 asking that Matt Berry was there. And so they had asked about, or I mean, they had brought that up, and it just felt like they were kind of, I don't know if that was an overt tease, but it felt like, hey, it's a good spot for what we do in the shadows. Sundays in Hall H. And I was like, it'd be neat if that got kind of the Always Sunny in Philadelphia situation. Where it just shows up every year. I wish It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia would also show up, but it was kind of nice having it there and being able to check out that. So that was a cool panel. Not full cast there, a couple zooming in and stuff, and so that was fine. And then so at the end, it was like, do we stay for Funko? So we had known from the second they announced Funko was going to be in Hall H, it was like, okay, we're going to go to that panel because we know they're going to give away pops. Like, there's no way they're not going to make a. There's no way Funko won't make a splash in Hall H. it was definitive. Then as the week came, it was like maybe. And then as we had a really good run, you won the Funko lottery. We got to go to Fun Days. We had a lot of Funko love. It's like, well, do we really need this too? Like we've had a really good run. Like we don't need every, Funko here this weekend. And what it really came down to was the idea of basically spending a half hour waiting for the panel to start, an hour in the panel, and then probably an hour to an hour and a half, 2 hours in the redemption room getting whatever the giveaway would be. And in the end, that's exactly what was going to be the case, because we have friends that were in that exact spot. They finally were able to get their Funko in hand around 5 o'clock. And just, I didn't really want to spend the last 2.5, 3 hours of Comic Con fighting crowds in lines and stuff. And so we made the decision to skip the Funko panel, even though we knew there was going to be some really amazing swag. I mean, the best swag of the weekend for sure, getting some limited pops. If you didn't see online somewhere, if you weren't in Hall H, I mean, they had some really great stuff. They have the Demigorgon, a blue and a white version that were in the 2,000, 3,000 range. Everybody got a Freddy Funko with the Comic-Con shirt, which I am pretty positive I'll own, but I'll own it after it drops down some, because I don't think at almost 7,000, it's like a 6,800 edition. Much like the Toucans, I don't think those things hold value very well, but they hold a lot of emotional value to me. So I'll wait a year and, or maybe 10 months and check in on it and see what it's looking like on eBay then. And then some people were able to get the 500 of Shang-Chi. There was a 500 of Ahsoka, and there was a 500 of Johnny Lawrence, and they were like straight, like the Johnny Lawrence was a straight black version and stuff. So really great giveaways there. They did some announcements about upcoming product. Really, really cool to see a big toy panel in Hall H and almost pack it. And if anybody could, it would be Funko. So that was very cool. But we did skip that. We were able to get, though, from the What We Do in the Shadows panel, they gave everybody tickets as well. And we were able to get the Nausea shirt for the nightclub. And so very thankfully, our friend Carrie actually ended up picking it up for us, because she was taking her tickets to go pick up her shirt, and she knew we really wanted to be on the floor. Want to grab people in the chat are wanting to see the Ghost Rider Hot Wheels, so we'll flash that up there again for those that are live.
We did already discuss that and
Yeah.
go over that. But
Pull it back a little so we can kind of focus. But yeah, so we were able to get the t-shirts, which was great swag as well. So not as good as getting, 2 Funko Pops for sure. And I saw immediately people were trying to sell them for like $200 a piece. And so very, very high-end stuff there. But I was really glad. I mean, I know if I would have, even with the Pops in hand, the idea of like the end of my Comic-Con was 3 hours of lines and stuff, I just wouldn't have been. I'm always happiest at a con on the floor wandering around. And I really wanted to end Comic-Con that way. As much as I love that we covered Hall H on Saturday, and to put in perspective for us, like Hall H on Saturday helped contribute like at least around 1,000 new subscribers. Like it's a powerful, powerful tool for us. The videos, I think we had around 600, 700,000 views, and it'll probably eke to 1 million just on Hall H this year. So it's very valuable to us, but as much as I love seeing all the Marvel stuff and all that, I'm much happier just wandering the floor. So I was glad that we made the decision to wander the floor, and we found some things, not any big swag things, but some kind of random, fun little things. Netflix was handing out some sort of like key rings to, what was you had opened that earlier, but some show that I'm not familiar with. I'm sure people listening in will be more familiar maybe than I am, but it's from Netflix. On one side, the key ring, and the other side has a bunch of foul language, which I guess we won't necessarily say here, in case we know some people listen with their families to the shows.
Welcome to the Mother Blank Day Shift. So yeah. I don't know.
I'm sure it's from some great show on Netflix, but they were handing those out. Over at Dime, they were handing out Magic the Gathering pin sets. Go. If you'd gone to the panel, Carmel's live on the floor, and thank you for doing that, and thank you very much for that comment. That's been a really cool tradition that Carmel started years ago, back when it was on Periscope instead of YouTube, but really love that we have that. And I went back and watched the 2019 one that Carmel did several times in the years without Comic Con that we've had, to just kind of watch that. Also, Thunder Comics, Scout Comics, I found that they started giving out bags, and I did not know that at any point during the con, but they started giving out bags. They were probably giving out bags from the beginning. It says Olympus Will Fall for Eternus, one of their comics. Well, Eternus is on both sides, but there's a Medusa image on the front, and then on the back is Olympus Will Fall. And it's kind of more of like a over-the-shoulder type, satchel type bag. It's funny how the bags have changed over the years. It's a whole different thing. But we've got, I mean, we don't even use them anymore, but we still bring them. But like back in the day, we filled up huge WB bags that are almost as tall as Carmel with stuff. And we would change out the bag 2 or 3 times in a day because we were just getting so many t-shirts and books, and you just needed to have them. And now we bring them every year and we don't use them. And that small bag that Scout Comics has is like, well, we don't even fill that up anymore because there's just not as many things there. Brandon's Bill's free bags are great. So useful. The Clerk's 3 bags were nice. Very nice. Very, very nice. I was so excited to see that Kevin Smith and crew brought those bags because that was like the one bag that was kind of throughout the con a little bit easier to get. And then I guess we can get to like the end of the day, right? The last chapter there, really, which was, you know, you going to do your live about 5-10 minutes. Well, I guess we kind of broke apart about 15 minutes before the end of the show. I really wanted to kind of soak in that last half hour. So like I would post like the 30-minute warning, the 15-minute warning on social, and then the final warning. It was very like touching. It was really the most emotional I think I felt throughout the entire Comic-Con process. Because a lot of people ask like, well, when you saw the banners up, did you cry? And there was a lot of times that it was like emotional coming back. But when they said, you know, Comic-Con had ended, people cheered like I've never heard them cheer at the end of Comic-Con before. Like they really cheered. And I took video of that and I posted it on social. If you've not checked it out, definitely check it out. It's got a lot of traction because I think a lot of people felt very emotional about it. But it just felt like people were celebrating in a different way. Not that people were glad Comic-Con was over, but they were glad that Comic-Con had happened. And it was really, really cool. But did pick up like Comixology was one of kind of the fun surprise booths this year with IDW. They were doing a purge of all sorts of pins at one point and posters. They had some Paper Girl posters there as well, but a bunch of different products that they have. Definitely Comixology having Amazon money pumped into them since the last time we had a Comic-Con has greatly changed the types of activities at their booth, and now they're really on the list of ones to watch out for. Right around close, was able to pick up the Halo Master Chief figure from Jazzwares. You can open it right there. It was limited to 1,000, and so there was a line there, and we let people know about that towards the end of the show as well. But was glad to get that, and that was one of those things that was like a lottery ticket thing, but we didn't win the lottery, but we were able just to get in line and get it as we came to the end of the show. Comic-Con itself was handing out tons of their Amazon Prime Video lanyards, so we'll use those with giveaways. We do, I should say, a lot of stuff to do giveaways with in the weeks and months ahead. So we always are trying to buy and acquire to do giveaways, but there were some very kind people that donated things to give away, like really good high quality things. AMC donated stuff as well. There was really, 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 really cool stuff we have to give away. So we'll probably post a contest tomorrow, and we'll probably do a few of them in the next few weeks and stuff. So keep an eye out for that as well. And then you got this. Was this during your live stream, or so she came back with a fig pen that she was given for free?
Yeah, so while I was doing the live walk around, I basically started in Funko and kind of walked, made my way basically all the way to row 100 by the end. And over in that gaming section where, well, the fake pin booth, there was a guy who had a box, and he just kind of randomly kind of pulling them out and asked people if they wanted one. And so, yeah, I was doing the live, but I saw that. So while I was doing live, I went and like, can I get one too? And he said, yeah. And he gave it to me. And so I got it.
And you said he was promoting his social media, but you don't know what his social media is?
He said just follow us online. So I
for Fig Pin.
I assumed it was Fig Pin.
Okay.
But he didn't specify,
That
and
makes
I
sense.
was paying attention to the live and the video, so I didn't like spend a lot of time there. And by that point, it was well after 5 o'clock, and security was getting pretty adamant about pushing us out. So I
Yeah.
kind of, yeah, the whole way I was basically kind of maneuvering and trying to avoid security um, to stay on the floor and to kind of show the floor as much as possible as I made my way out and stuff. But yeah, that was way down, and that was probably row 200,
Okay.
300, wherever the Big Pin booth was.
It's always interesting at the end of the shows. I mean, like at WonderCon, Aftershock Comics was doing their $20 trade paperbacks at like, I think it was $3 each. It was like 3 for 10 or something like that, like crazy prices. This time around, the Nickelodeon booth, they had a Rugrats bag and another bag, which I didn't know. It was like maybe it was just the orange symbol from Nickelodeon, but they were like, the girl was, this was after 5 up in the air. It was like a, an auction. It was like $50. Like a person would be like waving their hand, like, I'll take it. I'll take it. This is like totally like an auction or
Yeah, I
something.
think I saw that, or I walked by doing that while I was doing the live as well. And yeah, I only saw the Chucky purse. I think it was. I didn't
Yeah.
like look super close at what the second one
Yeah.
was, but
Yeah, and I didn't even know if that was, I mean, I figured it was a good deal, but I didn't know. Roosevelt seemed to be doing deals. There was a lot of deals going on the Lucasfilm Pavilion, and I don't know what the deals were. There was one booth that had a bunch of clothing, and they were like, take anything off the mannequins, 50% off. And it was like, it was just like, so I mean, when we get to the close of Comic Con, the big thing always is to share it with people, and the other thing is to find freebies. And so I didn't really find many freebies. I just found a lot of good deals like that, but I didn't really want to purchase anything at that point, and so it was what it was. But a lot of others seem to be purchasing. The Netflix booth was like kind of the WB booth of 2022, I think, with people constantly circling, and that went all the way to the end. In fact, when I took the video of the closing out of Comic Con, it was kind of in that general area, but there was several points where in the last 15 minutes of the show, people were just hanging on the Netflix booth. And then I kept seeing the Netflix employees telling them, we're not giving anything else out. We're not doing anything for sale. We're done. We're all off. And they were having like their team meeting, and they kept coming back and telling people. But Netflix was a very popular booth at Comic Con this year, and I'm sure people will be excited to see it return.
what do you even know what exactly was going on in the Netflix booth? I went by
Well,
it.
so you had to
Always
go.
looked kind of
Yeah,
complicated.
you had to go in the morning to get a QR code. Or so I posted in the morning, I think, video of that, and it looked like the WB booth when there'd be the Game of Thrones cast there or whatever. Not to that level of mayhem, but you would just have there was like hundreds of people circling the booth, and they all had their phones up. But what they were trying to do is not take a picture of a celebrity. They're trying to get the QR code off of their thing to get a spot to come later in the day and try for swag for t-shirts. I mean, they were promoting Gray Man and of course Stranger Things and a variety of other stuff from Netflix, but it's too messy for me personally, so we didn't do anything with that. And then we ended the night with everything over at the San Diego Comic-Con unofficial blogs end of Comic Con party. They had it themed the Gary Olympics with their mascot Gary the Dragon. Lots of giveaways, lots and lots of giveaways. I mean, it was crazy how many fig pens and squishmallows and Funko Pops and Snake Eyes symbiote dolls and stuff they were giving out. They had a bunch of fun games. Really great talking, maybe many that are in the chat today or right now, and just in general, a lot of very kind people, a lot of very nice people got to talk to there and kind of end the con. And Carrie and the team all were very efficient in how they had organized. Like people were in there at like right around 6 o'clock when it was supposed to start. It ended at 9 and it ended at 9. And it's just always love things that are kind of running like clockwork like that. But it was just good kind of hanging out with all those people. It definitely felt like, as running into friends at the con, and in this case, we'd seen many of our friends there many times, but just it did all feel like it mattered a little bit more after 1,000 days of not having Comic Con, So I think people appreciated the party that much more, and it was nice to kind of have that time to come together and wrap up the con for all of them and stuff. So
Not to mention the food at that restaurant, which was, I think,
the
the
garage.
garage, was actually very tasty
Really good.
and really good food.
I have
stuff.
never eaten there, but now it definitely would be a place I'd like to go back to. I was really kind of blown away by how great. You got a flatbread pizza and I got a burger, and it ended up being, I think, $38 combined, which San Diego Comic Con prices, that seemed really incredibly good. I mean, yeah, you can go on and on about how expensive food is during during the con and stuff, but it was really good food, and so yeah,
And the
hopefully we'll
servers were really good and
really great
stuff,
service.
and yeah, it was just really enjoyable, and everybody seemed to be having fun, and the games they created for the Gary Olympics were fun. Um, is that a family friendly party? And yes,
Yeah,
definitely. There
yeah,
was
there was little ones there.
a child who was not quite two, won one of the medals from the
Yeah,
coloring contests and
yeah,
stuff. So yeah, the games are like basically you got a
it's a
coloring book
coloring book.
page and you kind of decorated and or colored it in whatever theme, and so then there were winners for the coloring contest. Then they had the what did they call it? The little pipe cleaning things or whatever, so like the colored wire with like um, fabric on it or whatever, and people turned them into like or not dinosaurs, dragons and stuff,
yeah.
and those were fun. And then one of the contests was a ring toss thing,
Funko stacking was another. There's a
Funko
few different
stacking,
games.
and then
Yeah,
guessing the weight of a swag bag. And so
fun con themed ones.
yeah, and then the winners got medals, and the winner of the swag bag guessing the weight guessing thing got a big bag of all sorts of swag and
Yeah.
stuff. So yeah, definitely family friendly, and I'd say
Yeah.
kid friendly.
Yeah.
I mean it's just people hanging out having fun, and it
A lot of
wasn't
Comic-Con fans.
yeah, and just the same usual thing. I think everybody got two drink tickets and
Yeah.
stuff, and so it wasn't like anybody had too much to drink. There was no drama that I
No,
really saw
no.
or anything like that. It was just fun for just a lot of people hanging
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, it was a good get together for sure. Good party. And as that kind of brings the night to the close, then we're like, well, we always know in our case, like whenever we finish up a night, it's like, oh, we got to do back to the back to the room and doing video and stuff like that. So it's always like, oh, our night goes a lot later on that end, because whenever we're doing an event at Comic Con, it's always followed by what we're doing exactly now, recording and stuff. But did want to say, and there's been a few questions coming in, and somebody, Francis, had commented, I wish the convention center's food was as good as that at the Anaheim Convention Center. And one thing I wanted to note just about the food in general is that was one of the areas I think really a lot of people felt kind of the pinch of Comic Con in 2022. I mean, the food, there was a lot less available at Comic Con 2022 in the convention center. The hours were a little bit more limited at some of the spots there. The barbecue spot that is for you and I always a real treasure, where they're barbecuing outside up on the mezzanine level, was eliminated for this year. I mean, obviously there's just labor shortages, so those things are going to happen, but there definitely was a pinch there across the board. There was a lot of rust in general. Thursday and Wednesday, particularly, a lot of things ran pretty clunky in terms of lines and things like that. But these are all things I think we knew, or I know I planned on. For everything. My opinion I mean, we saw it all with the theme park world as things opened up. Is it just feels like everything has, for the most part, kind of a rough return, and then eventually it gets to a better spot in that next time around. There's not been many exceptions for that, but I mean, even Disney, all the issues they have had since the reopening. I mean, it's been still having. It's been a very slow process, and they've had a whole lot more time than a 5-day con. So I think all those things considered, things went pretty well. A question, Henry K. How many tickets may a person buy once he or she gets picked in the random queue? So if we're talking about like pre-sale for the following year, as we're looking at Comic-Con 23, I mean, things can change, but I believe it's 3 normally is that you can buy up to, if I recall correctly.
In addition to your
It's
tickets,
been
a
since,
total of 4 or
yeah,
a total of
I
3?
thought it was a total of 4, yeah,
Thing.
I think. But as we get closer, there'll be a lot about exactly that, of course. But things change too, so I'm always even hesitant to talk about that, because the last time Comic Con tickets were sold was back in 2019, so it was a whole different world the last time. So who knows what things. There were a lot of changes with badges for professionals, for exhibitors. I mean, there's been changes, so we'll see what it's like the next time Comic Con tickets go on sale for attendees, which will probably be September, October, November, so not too far away. Mimi asks, is it hard to buy a pass for Comic Con?
It's mini.
Mini Muta. It is generally and normally the way a lot of people do it is by kind of working with others to help each other. I mean, we have press now, but before we had press, we always were working with others of, well, we'll help you if we get in first and we can buy tickets for you and vice versa and stuff. So it's good to have kind of those. You can always make those friends if you don't already have them going to Comic Con too. In places like, I know our Facebook group, a lot of people team up there, which is just SDCC attendees on Facebook. That's a group that we run there. But yeah, having people that you can know are going to kind of have your back and look out for you
Yeah, I
helps
think
a lot.
I've seen people recommend the Friends of Comic Con.
Friends, yeah,
I think do a lot of that group buying and helping and stuff. So
yeah. Just having a team up, and for us, it's always been more of like, 5 people, not like groups of, it's funny when I look at our Comic Con group and there'll be like Hall H line teams of like 100 people helping each other out. And I was like, we've never been involved in groups that big for anything, but there are big groups out there that help each other as well.
yeah, so in general, you'll want to, if you don't already have one, create a Comic Con International member ID, because then you'll like get your emails. Be sure that you accept that you sent emails and stuff, because if you turn off those notifications, then you won't receive them. But that'll at least give you the heads up, and obviously follow the unofficial blog.
Yeah, SD_comic_con. Can't recommend them enough because at the end of the day, they're so good. But also, that is the thing they focus on. They don't like for us. We obviously focus on Comic Con so much; it's a big part of our year. But at the end of the
When
day,
we're in the Comic Con
yeah,
season,
we have those 3 months of like a heavy duty, but we do cover so many other things, all of the theme parks, and there's just a lot of things we cover with those. So it's good to have them on. I think always notifications in the outside of season almost more important than during the season because there's just those things that come up as well. I did want to talk about as we kind of come towards the end of things is normally we do a video on this last night where we just kind of talk about some of the trends. And so as we kind of wrap up, I just want to hit on a few things of that, of just kind of observations, I guess. So as we look at 2023, I think some things we can expect and, kind of look out for. One is that, we have seen more and more of a push for kind of the photo ops and the data mining and the use of social media over the physical. Not to say, I mean, obviously every episode we've done, we've talked about and shown t-shirts or pins or different things, but they have become a lot less and they've become more of the exception than the rule. In the old day, the big booths all had t-shirts and masks and I mean, just all sorts of hats. I mean, you were walking with big posters and things like that. And now it's much more likely that you're waiting in line to play a game, to give them your email, to get a photo op, to get a GIF of yourself, etc. And so it is things just to know. Now, that doesn't mean those things can be cooler than anything. It's just something to kind of know in planning of how much you value those. There are some, having a picture of yourself in the Iron Throne is a really cool kind of keepsake. And that might be worth more, though, than, dancing in the nightclub or whatever, a little gift of those things. So I do think we're going to see more of that. I don't see that going away anytime soon. At least that would be my guess right now, is that we're going to continue to push in that way. In terms of, the other aspects of the con, in terms of the booths, the types of booths, the exclusives, all of that, I do think we'll see a little more normalization going to 23. I think now that it came, I mean, I think Marvel and DC, I think, The Rock does a lot of things, but I think The Rock's big moment in Hall H, I think Marvel's big moments in Hall H, I think those things help a lot if you are the WB or your Dark Horse Comics or your Hasbro or whatever, because it just kind of normalizes things. It's like people were used to Comic Con having these big splashes and everybody kind of has to step up to them. But then you go 3 years in between Comic Con and everything else, and the world changes and people change jobs and all that. And I think a lot of companies kind of pulled back and some just weren't prepared and some are, in different. But I think this kind of like helps raise the stakes again. So I think we'll see, booths kind of make a more normal push. But I think the other thing is 23, I think, is going to be really interesting because I don't think in 22 not having WB there doesn't really matter. I think in 22 Hasbro shrinking to one booth and doing online exclusives, it's annoying, but I don't think it really matters. Lego not having minifigure drawings, annoying, but I don't think it really matters. But 23, the things that happened in 23, I think now those become the new normal. If Lego comes back and doesn't do minifig drawings in 23, I'm guessing we're not going to see them again until who knows when. So I think there's going to be a lot more questions almost about 2023 than there was about 22 in some ways, as we kind of wait to kind of see what happens there. And so I think that's kind of an important thing to note there. Offsites, one thing I wanted to note there, and then we'll get to our chat, and we see we have an awesome donation there, which we very much appreciate as well. But the offsites, I think we are increasingly seeing a trend, which is both kind of good and bad, which is the kind of immersive theater stuff. That's just becoming a bigger thing. We saw it a lot during the pandemic. There was a lot of drive-through events, at least there were in California, like the Stranger Things experience, which has also made its way to New York and other places. But it was these theatrical moments. I mean, during the pandemic, when we couldn't go anywhere but stay in our car in California, we were able to see this big show from Netflix and Stranger Things, and we sat in our car and drove from scene to scene. But actors did things, stuff flashed, they charged money for it. But Comic-Con's been slowly kind of going more and more the brands and the businesses, and so this year we saw Severance do it. We saw Dungeons and Dragons do it. We saw Netflix with Gray Man do it. FX to a certain extent has done it back and forth. House of the Dragon. And these were all kind of guided experiences where you have people kind of walking you from place to place. They're high on personnel. They are usually great on memories, but they are terrible on capacity. That's usually the trade-off, is very rarely are they good on capacity. So I know we heard different things. I mean, some people had amazing experiences at Dungeons and Dragons, and some had not so amazing. Severance seemed like a mess from start to finish. Like, not that it was awesome if you got into it or when you got into it, but there was a lot of reports of, I've waited 2 hours past my time, and things like that. So I do think it's something you have to be aware of, is like, I personally, even when we're able to make appointments, am more hesitant about wanting to book something, because it's like you can't count on, like, well, you have a media appointment and it's a 10-minute experience. That should only be an hour. But it's like, no, even with an appointment where you're just supposed to walk in, it could end up being like a 2-hour thing and stuff. So it is something to be aware of. I know going into 23, I'm going to try to be a little more careful about planning offsites, which is weird because we didn't do a lot of offsites till like 18. Then we did a lot in 19, and we did a lot this year. And now you have to wonder, like, is this, do we want to edge back a little on that? And so we'll see. But I think, be very careful if you're going to Comic-Con 23 in planning those offsites. And you really do have to almost look at, like, if you're going to do a Dungeons and Dragons, or if you're going to do a Gray Man, it may take 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, the way that going to a big panel in Ballroom 20 may take.
Well, and because of those challenges, it almost makes the standby almost just not an option. I mean, obviously some of them have standbys, but
the ones that you mean have reservations,
right? Yeah. They have reservations. Not all of them do, obviously, but the ones that do, but then still allow standby line. Like Severance was allowing a standby line, even though they were so backed up on the appointments they had. I think I saw someone tweet at some point that they had been open for 2 hours and it only let in one person in standby and stuff. So, in particular with those, with the offsites, the reservations seem to be that much more important if they're doing them. And then it kind of, the standby line is just I don't even know that it should be an option in some of those experiences, but obviously still some do. But obviously the planning and stuff and the prepping for it and trying for those reservations just becomes that much more important.
Well, and that's the thing with stuff, is because when you do the reservations and you say, well, we're going to allocate 10 spots for this 10 minutes, and that 8 people are going to show up and 2 aren't. Like, there's some that just aren't going to show up. But the problem with it is they get so behind that they're not even on top of their reservations. Like, their reservation people aren't getting in on time. So yeah, it totally negates the ability to have anything like that. I still am just a big fan of offsites, like what Dragon Ball did this year, and they've done for a few years, where you have kind of this big open air space. You've got a bunch of different things going on in it, and you can kind of just wander from spot to spot. And there are some big lines in there, but there's also a lot of areas where there's no lines. You can kind of hang out, kind of like what FX used to be, is where you can kind of choose to do those. But in the end, it really doesn't matter what our preference is. It just matters what it is. And I think more and more of the studios and the various companies, the entities, are seeing a lot of value in having these highly immersive worlds where they can roll in, and they treat it very much like it's a movie set or a TV production set, where they can come in like something like Severance. They don't even need to ever record any guests going through it. They don't need any guests at all ever to go through it. They can just go in with some of the talent from the show going through the experience and capture amazing content for their social channels, and that makes it a marketing expense well worth it. So in the older days, the marketing expense was trying to get the guests to experience it to then want to watch the show. I think now, though, a lot of times the marketing expense is more about capturing digital content for them to share with the entire world, say, look at what this cool thing we did here. And so it's really kind of slanted, and I think we just all have to remember that and be careful in terms of time allocations and stuff. But those are just some guesses, some, I don't know, predictions or whatever. It was interesting going back to 2019, and when we did this equivalent in 2019, it talked a lot about streamers, becoming a big thing. And it's like, well, I had no clue. Obviously, we'd have a pandemic, and they became even a bigger thing. But I'm really excited about that aspect, that places like Paramount Plus and Disney Plus and Hulu, etc., are part of all this, because Apple TV, they all have such incredible content, and it's nice to see them there. When you look at our Saturday in Hall H, you had Warner Brothers Films and Marvel Studios, which Marvel Studios also had a bunch of Disney Plus shows featured, so that had some streaming elements. But then you had House of the Dragon being promoted as an HBO Max show. You had Sandman as a Netflix show. You had Star Trek as Paramount Plus. So basically, if you look at it, Hall H, which used to be on a Saturday, all the big film studios, it really shows the change in the world. Is it was mostly a day of streaming, and most people were really excited about it and good with it and loved it. Not to say that the studios weren't still the biggest part of it. Definitely people were talking more about, Black Adam and Shazam and Wakanda Forever than they were maybe about House of the Dragon or those. But it is interesting that Hall H became a big streaming theater this year, and I think a lot of people were pretty excited about that. So I would imagine we'll see more of that in 2023 as well. So with that said, let's take a look at the chat one last time for our live audience. If there's any other questions or comments that people want to throw in there, and then we're gonna say goodnight to Sunday at Comic-Con. Din Boy says, thanks for always sharing your experience and tips. We didn't get passes this year, but hope to be back for 23. We hope you are able to make it back. We're excited for anybody that's watching, and we found a lot of people that have been kind of watching and joining us that are thinking of coming out to Comic-Con. I know there were several comments today about not being able to make it out this year or have never been before and things like that. One thing just to remember as a general about Comic-Con is kind of a year-round activity, which is moments of, so getting the tickets is the first thing, as Carmel said, getting that Comic-Con ID. But then things start to really kind of amp up as we get to March and April, and you have to really start watching, like, when is the hotel lottery? When's the parking lottery? Obviously, if you're flying in, getting your flights taken care of. Offsites start to be announced. I mean, we already know Marvel announced at this year's Hall H that they plan to be there in 23, so you start getting that kind of information even. So Comic-Con is a marathon, it's a year-round sport, and now the one thing we all have in common with 2022, just ending a few hours ago, is we all start over. None of us have hotels for 2023, none of us have tickets for 2023, whether you have to buy tickets or reapply as press or professionals or whatever, like all of us start back at the bottom of the mountain, pushing the boulder up and trying to get to next July 19th, and being on the floor at preview night. Was there another comment there we had? I don't think I ever bumped into anyone's shoulder. Okay, this is now Jose.
No way, Jose.
No way, Jose. Shoulders, the 4 days walking around the exhibit. I wonder what the attendance numbers were this year. Yeah, it's interesting. We found points in time where it was busier than normal. Like, for example, the last half hour, the last hour of the show was busier than a Sunday. I mean, Sundays are always busy on the floor, but the last hour or so was busy. And so that was interesting. But then there was other times where it seemed very open, you know, and so there was less offsites in general. So there was less people being sucked away to offsite. So that kind of weighs into it as well. But it is tough to know. I mean, panelists get so many badges, professionals get so many badges, attendees get so many badges, press gets so many badges. There's so many different categories. But I would be curious too, like to know what the numbers were from 19 to 22. But it was, you know, it definitely felt very crowded at points. It never feels as crowded there as it does at Anime Expo, and it definitely didn't feel as crowded as Anime Expo this year. But I as well would be very interested in that. Was there any more there? I did want to thank, there was a donation in the chat there from Din Boy as well. Thank you. Very kind. We always appreciate those donations. If anybody's interested, we have our bonus content for Comic-Con, and we will again in 23 on Patreon. We do want to thank our Parks and Cons crew over on Patreon. We'll be having lots of particularly Halloween type content coming up in the very near future there as well. So if you're interested in that, you can find us there. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up this show. We thank everybody for tuning in. We hope you had a great Comic-Con, whether you were at Comic-Con in San Diego or you watched it from afar and enjoyed some of the announcements and things like that. We thank everybody that gives any support to us in shares, retweets, comments, all of it.
Yeah, it was great to meet so many of you, and
awesome.
We appreciate all the thank yous and the support and the friendliness and the all those things that we have received in person and on videos and on social and stuff. And unfortunately, I don't think like on social we got a lot of stuff, and so we probably missed some, but we saw them, we appreciate them, but we didn't have a chance to respond to everything.
We didn't see them even all because there's just so much. The notifications just move so fast. So yeah, we apologize if we missed those things because it just moves too fast to keep up with during Comic-Con for us. But we saw Ariel there. It was great seeing you at Comic-Con. Good night to you as well, and everybody. We thank you so much.
Yeah, and so it's our pleasure to help, and we'll hopefully be here again next year doing the same type of stuff. And in the meantime, if you have questions and stuff, you can reach us at comments@Parks and Cons, and for parksandcons.com. And obviously we're on social and all those things. So thank you so very much for all the kind words that we received all week long and beyond.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll follow along with the other things. We cover so many conventions, and there's so many things about them that are fantastic, that are similar to and also different than Comic-Con. So, you know, D23 Expo is going to be a big con coming up, so we'll have lots of content from those as well. And as I said, also a lot of the theme park stuff as well. So we do appreciate you following along with us at all of it. So, and so Snoog 602 says 360 days to go. That is a perfect place to end it. Thank you so much. 300 days till Comic-Con 2023, but lots more content coming up in the days and weeks and months ahead as we get there. So everybody have a great night and happy Comic-Con.
Good night.